Fragrance ingredients either come from petroleum or plants.
A lot of the synthetic chemicals that are used to make these less expensive fragrances are derived from petrochemical feedstocks. And the reason for that is that they're a lot less expensive. We buy the natural chemicals, which are more expensive, of course, but derived from plant materials, from botanicals.
Natural fragrance makers often list their ingredients on product labels. But if anyone did want to find out what synthetic chemicals were used in a fragrance, they couldn't. Companies can claim those ingredients as a trade secret.
Some ingredients are extremely powerful. They can smell of sewage. But then if you dilute it, the same ingredient, it will smell of hazelnuts.
So it shouldn't surprise me that what I smell isn't real lemon or vanilla, but a concoction of chemicals manufactured for industrial distribution designed to trick me. Fragrance is a $100 billion industry and still growing. Whether a scent is promoted as a product feature or sold as a fine perfume, the truth is, most fragrance ingredients don't come from flower fields in France. They come from chemical factories in New Jersey.
The fragrance industry expressly said that they don't want consumers to know that the ingredients that are in Chanel No. 5 are some of the same ingredients that are used in their toilet bowl cleaner. They don't think the consumer is sophisticated enough to be able to make that distinction.
Many industries say their ingredients are a trade secret in order to avoid disclosing that their product contains toxic chemicals.
According to an independent lab hired by the Environmental Working Group, my blood contains 175 chemicals linked to cancer, 210 chemicals linked to heart disease, and 196 chemicals linked to birth defects. But the most disturbing results of this study revealed all 10 infants tested had almost as many chemicals in their blood as the adults.
We tested umbilical cord blood from 10 babies born in the U.S. We tested for more than 300 chemicals. We found 287 chemicals altogether. Everything from consumer product ingredients like Teflon and Scotchgard to flame retardants and fragrances to waste that comes from burning gasoline and garbage. The chemicals that are in the environment that are in our everyday products end up in our body. These chemicals get into the mother's body, slip across the placenta, and contaminate babies even before the moment of birth. And the fact is, each one of us, each of our children is born pre-polluted with hundreds of different chemicals from our everyday lives, from our everyday products.
Of the over 80,000 chemicals circulating in commerce today, of high concern is a family of commonly used chemicals called phthalates. Found in everything from fragrances to cosmetics, pesticides to plastics, cleaning supplies and clothing. Phthalates are also members of a longer list of man-made molecules called endocrine disrupting chemicals, or EDCs. Our endocrine system controls mood, growth, metabolism, sexual development, and reproduction, and relies on hormones for normal function.
There is a class of chemicals called endocrine disruptors that actually mimic natural components of our systems, hormones in particular. And these chemicals can interfere with the function of those hormones by binding to the same sites in cells where these hormones normally bind and creating havoc if the exposure to those chemicals is happening in a way that interferes with the normal processes.
Endocrine disruptors are synthetic chemicals that sneak into our bodies through the nose, mouth, and skin, and trick our endocrine system into mistaking them for real hormones.
When you have a synthetic chemical that is a mimic for a hormone or does something directly to disrupt the activity of one of those signaling naturally occurring chemicals, you have a disruption, and that has downstream consequences. The intestines go ahead and take more calories. The pancreas secretes more insulin, and the ovaries and testicles that secrete our sex hormones are sensitive to disruption by these chemical signals that are mimics for the naturally occurring hormones in our body.
EDCs are rarely listed on product labels, so we don't know when we're exposed. And these chemicals are everywhere. The truth is, EDC exposure has been linked to infertility, birth defects, learning disabilities, and cancer. Unfortunately, it gets worse. Endocrine disruptors are proven mutagens, which means they can actually mutate our DNA.
What's troubling is that endocrine disrupting chemicals can lead to changes in the chemical signals on the DNA molecules themselves that tell the body to turn off or turn on certain genes. So a child born to a mother that had an endocrine disrupting chemical exposure can have health consequences that have nothing to do with the child's exposure, but relate directly to an endocrine disrupting chemical exposure in the mother.
The rise in breast cancer, the rise in reproductive problems, the rise in certain childhood cancers, the increase of diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, all have to be due to environmental factors. And if you map the increase of those diseases against the increased use and exposure to toxic chemicals, there's a pretty good match there.
Dr. Arlene Bloom is an expert on flame retardant chemicals. Her landmark studies help get one form of the chemical out of kids' sleepwear.
Back in the 70s, all baby pajamas were treated with brominated tris. And we found that it was a very strong mutagen. It changed DNA, but industry likes to keep things as similar as they can, so they replaced brominated tris with chlorinated tris. And we ran more studies. It also changed DNA, and chlorinated tris was removed from children's pajamas.
Up until the 1970s, most home fires were caused by careless smokers. In response, government regulators asked the tobacco industry to come up with a self-extinguishing cigarette. They did, but there was one problem. It changed the taste. So Big Tobacco went to Big Chemical with a big idea. Why not change the couch and the mattress instead? And the flame retardant industry was born. Manufacturers infused these chemicals in everything, from furniture to electronics and children's products, including pajamas. The truth is, 7 billion tons of flame retardants saturate the industrialized world every year. On average, the typical home is doused with 4 pounds of this stuff. And today, kids have 5 times more of it in their bodies than their moms.
You know, I've heard statements, if even one life is saved, it's worth putting these chemicals in their products. There's a mountain of science showing harm.
A consumer warning this morning about some children's jewelry. About 137,000 pieces have been recalled for high levels of the toxic metal cadmium. The jewelry is sold at Justice stores.
The largest breast cancer foundation in the world commissioned a perfume, and it's called Promise Me.
And you always imagine what pink would smell like. This is what pink, the color, would smell like.
Komen didn't get into the specifics of the chemical formulation of their perfume. They really focused on how much money was being raised by their perfume.
What's so nice about this is sometimes it's hard to find something to give to a breast cancer patient.
They expect about $1 million would be raised by selling Promise Me.
This is $59 and sold out on hsn.com.
And we did find there were a number of chemicals of concern: galaxolide and oxybenzone, as well as toluene, which is one of the toxic trio.
For those of you, that might be suffering right now with chemo or radiation.
Chemicals that are toxic and hazardous, chemicals which haven't been adequately tested for human safety, and chemicals which are suspected to increase a woman's risk of breast cancer.
You're part of the promise now with this limited edition collection that's at a huge value.
In essence, what they were saying is that the ends justified the means, that $1 million raised for breast cancer justified selling this perfume.
These companies can make their products more cheaply if they use more toxic ingredients, and they don't have to disclose those ingredients.
Tosca also secretly put consumers in harm's way by limiting the ability of the Environmental Protection Agency to do its job.
The law has not given EPA the authority it needs to identify chemicals that may be problematic. And secondly, even where we do get information that indicates a chemical is of high concern, EPA lacks the authority to regulate that chemical.
To make matters worse, Tosca offers the chemical industry and product manufacturers that use the chemicals another important perk: secrecy.
One of the major problems with the current system is the secrecy about chemicals. So it's not just that they're not being regulated, but in many cases, their identity, the identity of the chemical is secret.
The chemical used to manufacture many of the products that we use every day, cosmetics, personal care, cleaning agents, are actually never tested to find out if they're harmful. Isn't that correct?
The industry conducts an extensive evaluation of their products, but FDA does not get to see any of that information.
Doesn't that cast amazing doubt on the ability of the regulatory system to actually protect the public?
Senator, at FDA, all of our products that we approve are based on data and studies by that particular manufacturer.
But doesn't that bother you? That's my point. You don't seem to see the connection here.
Senator, as studies become available to us, we at FDA apply them.
Studies from whom become available?
Whoever. If they've been
No, the only studies you're getting right now, have you asked for studies from independent sources?
We don't normally ask for independence.
Then you don't protect the American people. If you don't ask for them. If you don't look beyond what's handed to you.
So it's not a safety system, it's a marketing system that's in place to try to assure the American public that everything's handled and you don't have to worry about this, so we can keep doing business as usual.
As crazy as this seems, it's not just consumer products that use trade secrets to hide toxic chemicals. Hydraulic fracturing, or fracking, is a process to extract natural gas from underground rock. Fracking depends on billions of gallons of water, infused with a toxic stew of chemicals to release the trapped gas, like fragrance. Manufacturers of fracking mixtures claim the ingredients as a trade secret. But what's troubling is that fracking fluids and fragrance share many of the same toxic chemical ingredients. The truth is, it would be completely legal to bottle fracking fluid and sell it as a fragrance. And fracking companies could pump fragrance down a well to extract shale gas from the ground. Who knows? Celebrity fracking fluid may be the next frontier in product endorsements. Because the federal government fails to protect Americans under the Toxic Substances Control Act, state governments have been forced to pass laws to protect its citizens from toxic chemical exposures. This trend began in the mid-1980s, when the consumers in California faced off against the chemical industry in a showdown over toxic chemicals. The result was a tough new disclosure law called Proposition 65, or Prop 65.
Prop 65 prohibits businesses from knowingly exposing consumers to chemicals known to cause cancer or birth defects. They have to either reformulate the product to use less toxic ingredients, or remove the product completely from the market, or they have to put a label on the product.
Coke and Pepsi saying they'll change their recipes because of a chemical that could cause cancer.
Yeah, so Coke and Pepsi announced that they're going to change the formulation of the caramel coloring that they use in their sodas to avoid putting a cancer warning label. A consumer group found a chemical in there that has been linked to cancer in animals.
That's the good thing about Prop 65, right? It puts, the burden and the onus on the manufacturer. So as soon as Coca-Cola has to put a cancer warning on their main beverage, their Coke, then they're going to reformulate the product.
Coke says that there has never been a problem in terms of cancer from this caramel coloring, but they want to make the change to avoid that warning label.
The idea with Prop 65 was that the state of California, once they've identified that something causes cancer or birth defects, you're required to warn people before you expose them to it. And it has had an impact. If you have to put that warning on a consumer product and there's another product that doesn't have the warning, that actually has an impact.
I think if companies had to list what's in the products, it would change the industry, because once consumers know what's in the bottle, they start changing what they buy.
The industry foot soldiers in this well-financed campaign come from organizations called trade associations. These trade associations represent corporations intent on repelling any chemical regulation.
biggest problem with Washington is just the special interest money that corrupts the process. And it's most embodied in the American Chemistry Council, the trade association, which almost acts like a political party, a fierce little, a communist cell or something.
The American Chemistry Council, or ACC, is one of the most powerful trade associations anywhere. The ACC spends hundreds of millions of dollars to influence public opinion, fund political campaigns, and underwrite aggressive lobbying efforts, all to avoid regulation that would impact the profits of the largest chemical companies in the world.
These companies, have it down. They're going to do whatever it takes to feed their bottom line. And of course they're going to lobby against any kind of legislation that's going to legislate that they have to stop. They don't want to.
Testifying on behalf of consumers were world-renowned scientists, pediatricians, even firefighters. And then there was Steve Rosario, a lobbyist from the American Chemistry Council.
What type of evidence would be compelling enough to the American Chemistry Council to prohibit the use of a particular chemical?
Not being technical, I can't answer that question, but again...
Don't be technical. If there are peer-reviewed scientific studies, if there's testimony from the medical community and others saying this stuff is toxic, it's hazardous, especially to kids, is that a reasonable standard?
If the information is sufficient to show actual causal harm, we believe that whenever you ban a chemical or product, that is a very drastic proposal.
Why is that drastic?
It is drastic because you are impacting way, way more than the health concerns.
Ingredients have been banned for use in cosmetics in the United States.
I think the number is about a dozen.
Actually, I believe it's 10. And how many chemical ingredients have been banned for use in cosmetics in the European Union?
I don't know.
That's over 1,200. The Safe Cosmetics Act would require that ingredients that are found to be carcinogenic or interfere with development or cause reproductive harm would be phased out of products, that there be a list of ingredients, including the components of what are called fragrances.
But no matter how reasonable the regulation or balance the bill, representatives like Leonard Lance from New Jersey must make sure they never make it into law.
These products are among the safest regulated by the FDA, and the agency has strong authority to regulate cosmetics.
For over a decade, Leonard Lance has championed the cause of the chemical industry out of necessity. We're off to find the elusive Congressman Leonard Lance of New Jersey. Within the boundaries of Lance's home turf are the headquarters of chemical giant BASF, Johnson & Johnson, Procter & Gamble, Unilever, L'Oreal, Revlon, and it's home to some of the largest fragrance and flavor companies in the world. In the case of cosmetics, Lance introduced opposing legislation.
There's some speculation that the Personal Care Product Council, the trade association, wrote the bill, and Mr. Lance is simply the face of it.
Lance's bill doesn't prohibit carcinogens and EDCs. It prohibits states from passing laws that would protect consumers, using a legal concept called preemption.
The Lance bill would preempt any state regulation, which I think is a very bad idea, particularly given the fact that states like California have much stronger protections for consumers, and to preclude legislation that may be passed in the future from going into effect. That's its idea, really.
Simply put, a weak federal law would replace strong state laws. The chemical industry told us that lead was safe, asbestos was safe, tobacco was safe, and now it's telling us that the chemicals in our everyday products are safe. But if these chemicals are safe, then why is industry so afraid of disclosing them? Now, public health officials have brought the fight to reform TSCA to Washington.
Chemicals are contributing to the burden of disease in this country, the diseases that affect millions of American families, and TSCA reform is fundamentally a solemn exercise in trying to make progress in preventing that.
EPA cannot tell us with any accuracy how many chemicals are actually in commerce today, and chemicals that we were told we would never be exposed to are now routinely being found in the dust in our homes, in our environment, and even in the bodies of people living in the most remote parts of the globe.
Do you agree that chemical manufacturers should have to prove through unbiased studies that their products are safe for pregnant women, for infants, and for children before they can sell those chemicals in the U.S.? If someone can't answer that question with an affirmative response, then they are putting the special interests before the health of the people.
But consumers are no match for the American Chemistry Council's secret weapon.
If you think that this is somehow going to create jobs in the United States, I beg you to come and visit the industry and understand how it works.
Congressman Cal Dooley, a 7-term representative from California, proved himself a reliable soldier for industry.
Well, thank you, Simon, and I'm once again trying to do the right thing.
Marshaling bills that benefited companies like Monsanto, Conagra, and the meat industry.
Genetically enhanced products are, in fact, been determined to be safe.
And being industry-friendly in Congress really paid off for Cal.
I really have the honor of representing over 350 food, beverage, and consumer products companies.
First, as the CEO of the Grocery Manufacturers Association, Congressman Cal became Calorie Cal, and his salary was supersized. Then Calorie Cal got promoted.
I'm Cal Dooley. I'm president and CEO of the American Chemistry Council.
Calorie Cal was now Chemical Cal.